It was a cold gray morning in downtown Chicago. Courtroom 2A was scheduled for nothing more than a minor procedural hearing, just a routine check on paperwork. But the moment Alexandria Pierce stepped inside, she felt it, that uncanny, suffocating stillness. A seasoned attorney and former prosecutor, Alexandria had walked into countless courtrooms, but this one felt off. The silence was not ordinary. Court staff avoided eye contact. Even the walls seemed to listen. Something was wrong. Judge Franklin Devereux was already seated. Known throughout the circuit for fast rulings and little patience, he was the type of man who preferred authority over accuracy. He rarely read case files in full and often ruled before arguments could be made. As Alexandria walked to her table, she felt the weight of his gaze. He didn't see a colleague. He saw an inconvenience. The room wasn't just tense. It was staged. It wasn't a courtroom. It was a trap. Judge Devereux adjusted his robe and, without preamble, began. The matter before this court is resolved. The defendant is in violation of Municipal Code 22F. A fine of $15,000 is imposed effective immediately. This decision is final. No context. No process. No hearing. Alexandria hadn't even opened her file. She hadn't spoken. She looked across the room to the prosecutor, who seemed equally confused. No arguments had been made. No evidence had been presented. Yet a judgment had been issued as if the entire hearing had already played out behind closed doors. Rising slowly, Alexandria spoke, measured and calm. Your Honor, with all respect, no hearing has commenced. No arguments have been presented. I request the opportunity to be heard. Judge Devereux narrowed his eyes. You violated the code. This court will not entertain speeches or stall tactics. Sit down. It wasn't just dismissive. It was deliberate. A power play. A message. Don't challenge me. But Alexandria had seen too much in her career to be rattled by theatrics. She stayed on her feet. Her heart may have pounded beneath her navy blazer, but her voice never wavered. She replied, evenly, with due respect, I formally request to proceed on the record. Every word, every step. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was a power struggle, not between law and defendant, but between oppression and truth. Devereux's courtroom had become a stage for intimidation. He didn't seek justice. He sought obedience. But Alexandria wasn't built to yield. Not without a fight. She reached into her folder and began to unfold the legal equivalent of a scalpel, a stack of meticulously prepared documents. Your Honor, she said, we're about to talk precedent. She raised the first document, Sullivan v. State of Illinois, 2017. A defendant fined under code without evidence. The appellate court overturned it. She continued, Henderson v. City of St. Petersburg, 2019. A visual citation with no physical evidence ruled unconstitutional. She laid them out one by one. Each ruling, each precedent, a nail in the coffin of the court's baseless judgment. You fined me $15,000, she said, without any evidence. No testimony. No opening statements. That is not law. That is authoritarianism in judicial ropes. The gallery shifted. Even the prosecutor leaned forward. Alexandria stood tall. You can ignore my words, but you cannot erase precedent. You cannot rewrite the Constitution from behind the bench. Judge Devereux didn't reply. He stared at her, his posture rigid. His jaw clenched. His fingers began to tap, a silent staccato of frustration. The control he relied upon was slipping. Finally, he spoke. This court will recess for 15 minutes. No reason. No explanation. It wasn't a break. It was retreat. When the doors reopened, Devereux returned, but he wasn't alone. Judge Harold Whitaker followed him. Federal bench. Known across the Midwest for his no-nonsense approach and sharp intellect. Devereux, subdued, cleared his throat. Judge Whitaker has joined us to provide procedural clarity. The shift was palpable. Whitaker looked at Alexandria. Miss Pierce, restate your constitutional concerns. She did. Without hesitation. Without looking down. Each word an assertion of fact. Each citation a declaration of defiance. When Officer Nathan Ellis was called to testify, he carried the smugness of routine. But Alexandria dismantled it piece by piece. Did you take photos? No. Write a report? No. Witnesses? None. So you issued a $15,000 fine based solely on your personal judgment? Yes, he replied. She let it sit. Then, what you call a citation, Officer Ellis, is really just your opinion in uniform. The room froze. Judge Whitaker leaned forward. I've heard enough. Judicial discretion cannot override constitutional standards. There is no evidence to support this fine. The charge is dismissed. Judge Devereux didn't object. He couldn't. His silence screamed louder than any gavel. Alexandria didn't smile, didn't gloat. She stood as she always had, calm, composed, unmoved by theatrics. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about not being crushed, not letting the law be warped into a weapon. But just as she began gathering her documents, an unfamiliar voice rose from the gallery, sharp, urgent, and furious. "This is outrageous." She embarrassed the court. "Are we supposed to reward defiance now?" It was Gregory P. Langston, head of the City Enforcement Bureau and known political ally of Judge Devereux. His outburst had not been scheduled. His presence hadn't even been announced. He stormed forward past the rail, ignoring the bailiff's warning. "This woman," he continued, pointing at Alexandria, "has undermined the authority of this bench and jeopardized the integrity of our enforcement apparatus." Whitaker did not rise. He didn't need to. "Mr. Langston, this is not a political forum. You are out of order." Langston ignored him. "You think precedent saves you? You want a war in court? You just declared it." And then, with trembling hands, he pulled out a document. "We're filing a motion to have Ms. Pierce disbarred. Effective immediately. Conduct unbecoming." Gasps rippled through the room. Alexandria didn't flinch. Her eyes remained steady. Judge Whitaker's eyes turned icy. "You're threatening disciplinary action against an officer of this court for presenting binding legal precedent and defending her client, herself, with constitutional argument?" Langston sneered. "She humiliated your bench." Whitaker stood. "You humiliate this bench, Mr. Langston, not her. You bring politics into justice, threats into due process. You disrupt a proceeding with personal vengeance. This," he held up the disbarment motion without even reading it, and tore it clean in half, "is garbage." Then his voice darkened. "And if you dare submit a revised version, I will personally ensure you are held in contempt." Langston opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence was deafening. The war had just escalated, and he had lost before firing a single legal bullet. Whitaker turned back to Alexandria. "Miss Pierce, to date you defended more than yourself. You reminded this court, this city, that justice has eyes, but it also has memory, and it will remember what you did here." Alexandria inclined her head slightly. Her voice was steady, but this time, edged with quiet fury. "Then let it also remember that when power tried to strike me down, I didn't fight for myself. I fought for everyone who never had a folder full of precedent. Everyone who paid a fine they never deserved. Everyone whose silence was mistaken for guilt. The courtroom was no longer just a place of law. It had become ground zero for a reckoning. And somewhere, behind the fear in Judge Devereux's eyes and the shattered arrogance in Langston's clenched fists, the tremble of change had already begun.